Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to the Teaching English webinar for teacher educators. My name is Shirin and I'll be your moderator today. So thank you so much for joining today's live event. The focus of today's session is teacher education and practitioner research. How can one support the others? With Professor Richard Smith, and this session will explore how teacher educators can support and mentor teachers to develop their practitioner research. So as usual, before we start the session, I'd like to share a number of quick housekeeping reminders with you. And while waiting, please share with us in the Q&A where you are from. If you work in pre-service teacher education, type pre-service. If you work in service, type in service in the Q&A. This session is being recorded and a recording of the webinar will be available on the Teaching English website in the next couple of days. The link to the certificate will be provided in the thank you email that you'll receive after the session tomorrow. And finally, you will have a chance to ask questions during the session. So please use the Q&A to ask our presenter your questions. We'll be using the chat only for announcements. So let me introduce our presenter today. Richard Smith is a professor at the University of Warwick, where he has taught on the MA TESOL program and supervised PhD students for 25 years. He has advised on several teacher research mentoring projects. Hi, Richard. For the British Council and developing the exploratory action research approach to teacher development in the process. And his research and professional interests also include history of English language teaching, learner and teacher autonomy, and teaching in difficult circumstances. So we will be so over to you, Richard. So we'll be looking forward to your session. So yes, great.
Right. Well, thank you, Shirin, and thanks very much for the invitation. Very nice to see you all. Well, I can't actually see you, but anyway, it's nice to be with you today. So this is a good opportunity for me to talk to teacher educators. I know that some of you may be more like teachers, identifying as teachers of English, but I'm going to be talking to you, imagining that you are a teacher trainer, a teacher educator. So this is my theme, teacher education and practitioner research. How can one support the other? And let me begin with a little introduction to myself, perhaps. I teach at the University of Warwick in the UK. I've been here for 25 years, teaching student teachers from many different parts of the world. Some of them have not taught before. Others are experienced teachers. I'm teaching them on the MA TESOL program here. I have also been working quite a lot with teachers through different projects with the British Council in different parts of the world, and I'll be talking about that with you today. So what I'm planning to talk about is some starting assumptions that we need to clear up at the beginning. And then I want to talk about how can we, if we want to, introduce student teachers or introduce practicing teachers to practitioner research in service, but also pre-service in universities or in other pre-service situations. I am mainly focusing on pre-service training for school teachers and in-service work with school teachers. And then we'll have a little break for Q&A. So please do think of your questions and write your questions into the chat, into the Q&A, sorry. Then let's get a bit more practical maybe about how teacher educators can mentor practitioner research, and finally talk about how teacher educators can research their own practice, do practitioner research about their own practice. Okay, so starting assumptions. I don't know you, I can't really watch the chat unfortunately as I'm talking, but we have to acknowledge, or I have to acknowledge, we all have different experiences around the world. We have also very different contexts for teacher education, and we have different opinions about matters. So what I'm thinking of doing, I mean, that was perhaps one reason to ask some questions to you, to prepare for the webinar. Many of you did answer these questions. I can just report back to you what people were saying in answer to these questions, your opinions about the relevance of practitioner research to teachers. There was this statement, research is for academics, but not for teachers. Well, I'm happy to say that the overwhelming majority disagreed with this statement, and also disagreed with this statement, although there were maybe more people agreeing with this than the previous statement. So that's something we do have to take into account, the time or the ability that teachers have to do research. Yes or no question. I've carried out research myself. Yeah, most of you have carried out research yourselves. Many of you have helped a teacher to carry out research. It was quite balanced between the two, yes and no. And I think there are a little bit more no's about I know how to help a teacher to carry out research. And so this is what I'm going to help you with, I think, today, hopefully. Now, I'm going to set out some of my own opinions and from my own experience. And this is a kind of starting point for me in talking to you. I think in my experience, there's generally recognized to be in the field of English language teaching a gap, a divide between the research and the theory that is generated, maybe often in universities by academics, and the concerns of practitioners. We often hear these days, and we have always heard over many years, about the way that research doesn't reach practitioners, or that the research is not really relevant to practitioners. The research is inaccessible, and we've had webinars about this in this series before. For example, Graham Hall was talking about this gap. Well, this is a well-recognized gap, I think, a reality. I think a particular problem or issue in our field of English language teaching, compared with maybe other subjects, where there are also gaps of research and practice, in our field, many theories and a lot of research is done in Anglophone countries and exported as a kind of methodology to other countries. And this is a well-recognized problem in our field, of the way that a lot of methodologies are maybe not appropriate in different contexts around the world. Well, when we come to teacher training, we have to see that we are involved in these gaps, in these divides. There is also a recognized gap between the teacher training that student teachers get, their initial training, pre-service training, and what happens when they go into schools. And teachers are often saying, well, the training I had didn't really prepare me for the realities of teaching, especially in those first few years. So this is another gap. I think these three divides, or these three gaps, sort of lay on top of each other. And we often find that teacher educators are trying to mediate theory or research or best practice downwards towards teachers in a kind of transmissive way of doing teacher training, teacher education. And we could say, well, that we are following often a kind of applied science model. Unfortunately, from my point of view, I'm just expressing my own opinions, I think this applied science model is making a comeback. I think actually we see a lot these days of assumption that research that is done in universities by academics should be read, should be implemented by teachers. I think there's a particular culture that has been arising around this idea, which I personally resist. There's also craft model of, well-practiced sorts of methods that teachers are encouraged to copy. Well, there's also that model. These labels come from work by Mike Wallace back in the 1990s. Okay, so we often talk about these issues or these problems, and I would like to share with you a kind of vision which I have of what could replace this, or what could be a kind of possible alternative. And then later, I hope that I'll show you how I've tried to put this into practice in my own work in teacher education. But I think that ideally research or theory should serve practice. That practice should not be just something that research, abstract theory comes into implementing into practice, but the research that goes on, the theory that is developed, should be coming out of teachers' concerns and be for their benefit. That should be our main reason to do research or to develop theory. Methodology, appropriate methodology. This is the key. We need methodologies which are relevant in local contexts, not simply a one-size-fits-all methodology. So we can develop methodology from local practices. And in teacher training, the realities of the issues that teachers face should in some way form a basis for the kind of teacher education that we do. So this is a kind of vision, if you like, which inspires my work. The teacher educator is central. The role of a teacher educator should be seen as really important and really central, much more maybe than academic research, academic theory. The teacher educator is the person who can facilitate experience-based theory development. Now we know this when we talk about reflective practice developing or a reflective model of teacher education, where we are working with what students bring to the teacher training situation. We're encouraging them to develop their own theories based on their own experience. And this is a kind of constructivist approach to teacher education, which we know about, a reflective approach. But I think we can go a little bit further even and talk about teacher educators facilitating the sharing among teachers of good practice. I don't say best practice, but of good practices. Teacher educators can have an important role in kind of disseminating locally appropriate practice. And so increasing, when I say upwards, what I mean is that increasingly, as a kind of vision, we could see that teacher educators are drawing out from local contexts the good practices that we do see, which vary very much according to context, and sharing among teachers in those contexts, and therefore somehow taking control of the discourse on English teaching, a kind of resistance to the top-down impositions which we see in our field. So I kind of want to validate and see that we can strengthen the identity of teacher educators. Why are my opinions like they are? Well, it comes out of my own experience, of course. We all have our own opinions, and they come out of our own contexts, our own experience. So I have to share this a little bit with you. I was a teacher for a number of years out in Japan, and I increasingly realized that I needed to develop a more appropriate pedagogy. And the way I started to do that was to research my own practice. I didn't call it action research. I hadn't really heard about action research, but I was certainly not only reflecting, but I was also getting data from my students. I was getting my students to write down opinions about the class and what they thought should be happening in the class. And in retrospect, looking back, I realized that was a sort of practitioner research. So for me, it was quite important in my own development in making my teaching more appropriate, I thought, in the university situation where I was. When I moved to the UK, I became simply a teacher educator, and I wasn't teaching English anymore. I had already been doing some teacher education for Japanese students who were preparing to become teachers, but this became my whole job. I'm now a teacher educator, and I've been this for 25 years. And what I decided I should do, because I have students coming from many countries around the world, I decided I didn't want to tell them how they should teach, because I don't know their context. I recognize their own expertise in their own context. I wanted to develop their own ability to develop their own appropriate ways of teaching. And for me, the best solution was to engage them in a kind of action research process. In other words, give them a taste of action research, give them the tools where they could then go and address issues that they face in their own context and learn how to teach, or at least learn how to learn to teach. So I kind of theorized this as developing their autonomy as learners of teaching, teacher-learner autonomy, which I think of as the ability to self-direct one's learning of teaching in cooperation with others, not just on your own, but with others. And I wrote about that in some articles. But I've also become, over the last 10 years, become more involved with working with teachers in various global South contexts through British Council projects, which I'll talk about. And I was invited to introduce practitioner research to those teachers. I wanted to do that. I believed in practitioner research as a way to address difficult circumstances, low resource context, lack of technology, etc., other problems with large classes and things. But I definitely didn't want to add to their existing burdens. But my examples will come from that work, mainly. And to some extent, I've done some practitioner research into my own practice, addressing my own difficult circumstances in the pandemic in particular. And at the end, I'll maybe talk a little bit about that. So I just want to make this distinction here. We hear quite a lot these days about how teachers should engage with research, and that may be something that you do. As a teacher educator, you encourage them to read articles, etc., written by academics. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today, because I think what's on the right is, for me anyway, more important. Anyway, on the left, we hear a lot about research literacy. We hear a lot about making academic research results more accessible. Of course, they're often not accessible to teachers. But anyway, what I favor and what I pursue is engaging teachers in research, doing practitioner research, which we can define as simply as research into your own practice, which is directed by you as a practitioner. That could be a nurse or a doctor, or we're talking about teachers. So I like to have a hyphen between teacher and research. It indicates that it's teachers who are deciding on the research. It's teachers who are doing the research, and it's for their own purposes. So research for teachers, by teachers, and their students, of course. So we know a lot. I'm going to assume that you've heard about, you know about action research. I'm also going to assume that you can find out about exploratory action research. We're using some of the links on the handout I've prepared, which has a lot of links and to things like this. My experience developing this approach, which we call exploratory action research, came through a great opportunity I had given to me by the British Council to go and work with teachers in Chile, in Latin America, 10 years ago. And you can see some of the work we did. You can see some of the final presentations of the teachers. And you can read about stories of exploratory action research, which basically means exploring a situation quite deeply before you take action to change the situation. The exploration is going to involve gathering data from the students and from others, maybe. And it's going to help you to understand the situation before you decide on a plan of action, which we associate with action research. And we developed this really because it was a kind of gradual introduction to action research for teachers who are already very, very busy. We didn't want to give them that extra burden. We wanted to show them how practical and useful doing research in your classroom can be to address issues. Out of this experience, which went on for a number of years in Chile, in Peru, and other countries in Latin America, with Paola Rebiedo, we made this handbook, which I think I'd like to encourage you to look at, maybe to click on now as you listen to me. It's one of the first two items on the resources list. I hope this is being shared. A link is being shared in the chat for you. So, because I think this will show you the kind of action research I'm talking about. So this is the handout, and you can see it's the very first item on the list. Now, practitioner research. I'm sure you've heard or you think about challenges that there might be in introducing teachers to practitioner research, to doing research. We often hear, and these are real challenges, teachers' lack of time. Those teachers in Chile were often teaching like up to 40 hours a week, not only in one school, but in going to different schools just to make enough money to survive. The 40 hours were not full hours, but they were lessons, different lessons, 40 different lessons in a week. Now we have to recognize these challenges. I have to say, nevertheless, those teachers, at least many of those teachers, did complete projects and saw value in these projects. We often hear about teachers' lack of research ability. We sometimes hear from an academic perspective, well, teachers' research, it's not really rigorous. You can't generalize it. And we also have to deal with teachers' own preconceptions about what research is. And they come often to these projects with conceptions that they have to do a project which is rather like their dissertation when they left university, just when they were leaving university. But we have to, I think of a different approach. Oh, and I would like also to recognize that you may be feeling, well, I'm not sure if I know how to introduce practitioner research to students or to teachers. That's one challenge. And there are also challenges in your own mind about how you view research and whether you think, what kind of research you think the teachers should be doing. Now, potential benefits, these come from my own actual experience of working not only my own practitioner research, but working with teachers, many teachers. And we have found that practitioner research, when it's presented in the right way, presented as something that is useful, practical, and feasible, doable, can lead to a change in mindset, quite a deep change, and a change in relationships with students. I don't present this as a magical solution, but it is something that we've found through our improved. And I think that's something to do with getting data from students, getting data from asking students their views. They do develop a kind of toolkit. Okay, well, maybe they didn't have that ability, but we provide them with a toolkit which they can use to address issues as they go forward. It has a strong impact on professional development, and for me, this is why I'm very enthusiastic. It's teacher research for development of teachers. I'm not so concerned with whether it is going to be generalizable, if it's going to have usefulness to that teacher. And they end up with a revised, demystified view of research. And at the end, I'd like to come back to the issue of benefits for you as a teacher educator. Okay, so I hope at least if I haven't persuaded you, at least I've whetted your appetite, as we say, for introducing practitioner research to teachers or student teachers. And when we talk about introducing practitioner research to teachers or student teachers, from my experience, here are some general considerations, some general principles. I think it's valuable to reduce jargon as much as you can. Research comes, academic research comes with many, many technical words, which tend to be very off-putting for teachers. Teachers basically often think research is not really for me, it's for people who have that technical ability or knowledge. So we try to adopt a relatively down-to-earth approach. I don't have time to go into what we do, but I think if you click on the handbook, you'll have a good idea. We're trying to explain things, not in an oversimplified way, but in a down-to-earth way. For example, simple definitions of what research is and how it can be something part of your life. It is part of our lives. We de-emphasize, this is especially work with practicing teachers, we de-emphasize the need for literature review, and we decrease the focus on written product. So if it's not necessary to have a written product, we don't say that you have to do that. It's a voluntary outcome of work with in-service teachers. I do think that practitioner research should be voluntary, actually, and if it becomes compulsory with some kind of written product, there are some problems associated with that. Anyway, we value sharing, but through posters, and I think you saw some of the posters. When it comes to student teachers and university, we need to think differently. But I still think that the starting point for practitioner research should be an issue in the teacher's own practice, teacher's own context. It doesn't have to be something that has a gap in the literature, because that is going to mean that teachers will be put off by the whole business. You can show that practitioner research is done by teachers. Some people have written and said, oh, well, it's all very good in theory, but teachers don't actually do practitioner research unless they have to do it for a degree, Well, I think we've shown through our work over the last 10 years that that is not true. That many teachers are doing practitioner research and are finding. And now we have many examples that we can share to show how teachers can do teacher research. And so on the handout, that's what I've given you. I've just given you lots of different open access links to different projects around the world in different contexts where teachers have done practitioner research, and we've encouraged them to write about it in a down-to-earth way, which will be useful and enjoyable for other teachers. There are also some links to a video which you can share with teachers, share with student teachers. Okay. And in service, I just want to share with you some ways that teacher education has been, the practitioner research has been introduced to teachers. And you can see that in the list that some of these are represented in the books that you can see there. I acknowledge the British Council's great support for practitioner research over the last 10 years. Champion Teachers Project in Latin America has given rise to some of those books that you can see. The ARMS project I was involved with in India and Nepal, involving supporting mentors who then mentor teachers, groups of teachers. And in Africa, English Connects Africa, you can see some books there. So we could imagine, so I don't know your situation, I don't know your role, but if you have the ability to persuade a British Council, persuade an NGO to have a project, you might find inspiration from some of these projects. There have been some cases where ministries have become involved. In Chile, in the initial stages, they were involved with the champion teachers. Nepal has its own government. The Nepali government is already promoting practitioner research. I think there are some issues when a government becomes involved and makes it compulsory. I think we can maybe talk about that if we have time, where then it somehow sometimes takes away the spirit of practitioner research or the willingness of teachers to do practitioner research. And I've been involved a little bit with visiting the SCRT in India, Delhi, who have been promoting teacher research recently. Some problems, I suppose, that have arisen are that both projects and ministry involvement is sometimes rather short term. We have a change of government, and or change of priorities, and they move on. So I think if we think about sustainability, which I think is very important, I quite like the way that teacher associations have been promoting practitioner research. IATEFL also acknowledge their great support for teacher research over these last 10 or so years. Many of those publications are published by them. INET in India has had a very good supportive project for teacher research, and TESOL Bangladesh just now is doing the same thing as some examples. And if you are very involved with a teacher association, you may get inspiration from there and suggest to a teacher association that practitioner research is something relevant to promote. I do think it is something that teacher associations, research SIGs within teacher associations can get involved with in a very valuable way. I want to highlight to you the fact that there are, in fact, some independent associations which are promoting close to practice research and practitioner research. One is RISELT in Chile, which has just celebrated its 10th anniversary, and they've supported teacher researchers as well as other kinds of close to practice research. And then Netruz in Uzbekistan, and you can see the book that they published. Great. I mean, that's very sustainable kind of thing, where it could go on for a long time, and you could develop a whole community of teacher researchers in a particular country. And I also want to give a shout out, as we say, advertise or commend the activities of some university-based or teacher training college-based teacher educators. I feel teacher educators have a very important role to play in their own institution, and it's beneficial for us as teacher educators, not only for teachers. GTPAs in Portugal, my friend Flavia Vieira, I was very impressed with what she was doing. So she was every Saturday, it doesn't have to be every week, but she was inviting local teachers to the university. They saw a lot of benefit of coming and being in touch again with university life. They would meet up with the student teachers who were preparing to be teachers. Of course, student teachers get a lot of benefit from meeting up with teachers in real context. And the teacher educators would get a lot of benefit from hearing concerns of teachers. It's benefiting everybody. And they would often have practitioner research projects as their main focus. That was a great example. And I wish that happened more. And if you are a university-based or teacher training college-based teacher educator, please consider how can you bring teachers to the university to interact with them for the benefit of everybody and support them in doing practitioner research. I'm involved with this project led by another university in Thailand, and they are trying hard to develop a whole community of teacher researchers in Thailand. Rama Matthew at Delhi, when she was working there, was doing the same, and Eric Ekembe in Cameroon is doing the same thing. And I would like to highlight to you that this has just started, an international festival of mentoring teacher research in ELT. I'm organizing this with some funding from my university. This talk today is one event in the festival. I really want to encourage you to come along to webinars that we are going to be holding. The reason to tell you about this now is because a major purpose of this festival is to map what is happening in different contexts around the world. This is just what I know, but I'm sure there are other things happening, and maybe you can share what you are doing locally with in-service teachers. I just want to also, of course, talk about pre-service. And I have managed, with my own student teachers, to introduce some practitioner research in different ways. One way is just to tell them about it, to talk to them about practitioner research. These are students who are pre-service, who are going to become teachers. But I think ideally you would be giving them an experience of action research in a particular module. And I've also managed to do this based on micro-teaching. And some of them are based on the real teaching that they were doing, or they have been doing. I know that some of you are teacher trainers for people who are already teaching at the same time. If that is the case, there are possibilities to have a module based on an action research model. And we also want to try to map some of this practice in a way that has not been done before. I'm going to be writing something connected with this webinar, and I'll try to write a little bit more about these possibilities. Some places have introduced practitioner research as part of teaching practice, part of the practicum. For example, Durbin in Pakistan. And in other places, it is possible perhaps to replace the traditional sort of research, academic kind of research, with a more practitioner research sort of thesis, graduation thesis, about your own teaching, if the students are doing teaching, or collaboratively with a teacher. Now, these are initial ideas. These are ideas we need to develop together, but these are some possibilities at least. I'm going to take a pause there and ask if you have any questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Richard. So this area is really this practitioner research, combining research and practice together. I want to ask you a question. This is also, I will be combining some other questions from our audience. So do teacher educators need to conduct action research themselves before they start mentoring others?
That's a good question. I'm not sort of dogmatic about this. There are many cases where teachers have not necessarily done practitioner research themselves, but they become inspired, they become interested, they want to do it, and they make a great job. I think it's more about the kind of attitude. It's a kind of attitude of not necessarily enforcing the preconceptions that you have about academic research into practitioner research, because that does happen quite a lot. If somebody hasn't been researching their own practice, or if they don't quite understand the context in which teachers are working, then there is a tendency to kind of overload teachers with expectations, I don't know, of statistics or questionnaire reliability, design, etc., which are just not appropriate in that kind of busy teaching context. That can happen, but I mean, it can also happen that a teacher who comes with that teacher educator who comes with that assumption realizes and learns about the realities of doing practitioner research as they go along. So that's why I'm not saying that teacher educators have to do their own practitioner research, but it does help. You know, I want to end by saying that yes, I'll say a little bit at the end about how teacher educators could become involved in practitioner research. And it would be very useful.
Yes, okay, thank you. And these handbooks, first of all, the handbook for those who want to start exploratory action research is very easy to read. I would really recommend our colleagues. Some of our colleagues couldn't download it, and I'm going to share it once again. So in the document that Richard shared, there are lots of very user-friendly, easy to read and follow handbooks. One of them is the Handbook for Exploratory Action Research. The other one is Step 2, the Mentoring Teacher Research Handbook. But there are some other materials that you will see. I think it's a learning curve, and it's about also learning by doing. But as you say, it's about maybe having this interest in conducting teacher research. I really find it transformational. And I would also like to ask another question from Anindya. She says, how to find time for research activities within the academic year, and how to incorporate teacher research in the teaching curriculum for teachers.
Mm. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I would love to talk to you more. Maybe you could contact me later because your context, I can't get a picture of your context just from your question, so I can't really answer you. You know, I'm not sure if you are working in university or college yourself. Teachers themselves, yeah. I mean, in terms of practicing teachers in schools, yes, there is some extra time involved, but it's a balance. As I hope I could show that there are benefits to be put into the balance as opposed to the extra time. But it is true that for some teachers it becomes too much of a burden and they can't continue. I want to acknowledge that. How to find time for, well, research in general is a problem for all of us. But then we have to think of the benefits on the other side. I'm not sorry, I didn't really answer your question because I can't really picture your situation.
Yes, you are right. So it's about the context. It's a professional development activity at the same time, and teachers allocate time for professional development, and this is one of the activities. And
That's
can
true.
you
Sorry to
also,
interrupt, Shin. But
yes,
yes, I mean, I see practitioner research as a teacher development activity, as a professional development activity, primarily. That's my view of practitioner research. That's my view of its value, primarily, and it's not to contribute to the wider literature, etc. It can, but primarily it is for the teacher and for the benefit of the teacher and for the benefit of their students in that particular situation.
Mhm. Thank you, Richard. And very briefly, can you also tell us the difference between exploratory action research and action research?
I would just send you to the book, the handbook, a handbook for exploratory action research. I have given a lot of webinars about what is introduction to exploratory action research, and I think there is a good link right at the bottom of the handout where Paola and I were giving a webinar introducing exploratory action research to teachers in, I think, Ukraine. So I would just briefly have to answer in that way.
Okay, thank you. So these are the resources to start with. There are so many questions. Julius asking, I understand teacher research starts with the willingness of the teacher. to research their classroom, what will be the impact of introducing teacher research in pre-service education on the purpose of teacher research?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really gone into pre-service very much, but I can say that that last slide I was showing shows some ways you could conceive of introducing practitioner research into pre-service training. I think it would be very valuable because teachers would start their career with an idea that they have a toolkit, they have a way of addressing issues themselves as they go through their career. If they have a problem, they find a way to overcome it through doing a little bit of research. I don't mean they would do it every single year of their career. I haven't, but in my own career, it has been quite useful at particular times of difficulty, and it can set teachers off with I think, a good view of research, that it's something to engage in. It's not just something to be a victim of, if you like. It's not something that you always have to follow that other people's research. It's something that you can do yourself. So it can counteract this very strong view in our field that research is something that other people do, and that is done to us, as it were, as practitioners. But I'm trying to promote the idea that research is something we can do to improve our own situations, and that can start with pre-service. If it doesn't start with pre-service, instead, what often happens is teachers start off their career with a kind of the other view of research, that it's not for them. It's something that they've been told they have to read for their degree, and they're never going to do it again. That's the downside.
Okay, so related to your answer, there is another question which is from a contextual question from Iraq. So Amjad says, in my context in Iraq, there is a big body of research on ELT, but it's rarely relevant to my needs as a teacher. Similarly, training has very little to add to us. Most of the training programs are brought from privileged contexts, and my challenges in the classroom are significantly different. This issue is very well recognized among my colleagues, but the question is, what should be done? Shall we import intervention from abroad, or shall we stick to our local for relevant research and intervention? So
That was like my very first assumptions. So, I'm agreeing with your assumption there, that so much research that's done is not really relevant, or is not accessible, that so much training that is done is not really relevant. You're just saying exactly what I think as well. It's a terrible situation. I mean, let's be honest. Why is the world like this? Why is there so much inappropriate research and inappropriate training being imposed onto teachers? Why don't we look at what good teachers are doing locally and build our teacher education work on that? Why don't we start to try much more close to practice research locally? Why don't we do this? Why do we always look to what's outside? Yeah, so I'm agreeing with what you proposed, to be local, to be contextual, and practitioner research, supporting practitioner research is for me a good way forward.
And what about collaborative teacher research? Miriam asked about this. Will you mention
Okay.
this one as well?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there are many sort of, I decided not to go through all the different ways we can describe practitioner research, but collaborative action research, or collaborative exploratory action research, it can have different meanings. I mean, I think what I used to think it means was teachers together researching an issue that they all share. I think there's great value in that, great value in teachers being, talking together and saying, we all have this issue, let's get together and try to research it. That can lighten the load of doing research, definitely. Another meaning of collaborative research, which I think is often used, is that maybe a teacher educator collaborates with a teacher to help that teacher to address issues in their context. Or maybe a university academic, or maybe you are a university, like me, a university academic and a teacher educator at the same time. Anyway, you are collaborating with a teacher, a school teacher, to help them, support them, but don't take over, not taking over, supporting them to address an issue which is really relevant to them. And that the danger is exploiting them. So let's not exploit them, let's support them. But publish together. It's actually a really good way to, I think, to also, we're always concerned as teacher educators, usually anyway, that we need to publish, etc. Why not think about doing that? We're collaborating with local teachers and, writing together. So author the article together, or edit their own research stories, etc.
Yes, that would be really valuable. Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. So if you like, we can continue and we will
Okay.
come back with more questions.
Okay. Right. So thanks for your questions. I'm going to talk now a little bit more down to earth about, in case you're wondering, well, what kind of skills do I need maybe as a teacher educator to support teachers to do practitioner research? And as I've been trying to show, you may be, of course, you are based in an institution probably, or maybe you're not, maybe you are freelance, but there are things that you can do to support school teachers or teachers of English through teacher associations, through bringing them to the university or to the college, for example, and interacting with them and designing projects together. Also, things that you could imagine doing in pre-service with your own student teachers if you are working with them. But what kind of skills might be needed? Out of the projects I was involved with the British Council in India and Nepal, especially, I wrote this book. So I'm going to say, unfortunately, I'm going to say to you, go and look at the book, because this gives answers to questions from my experience. How can you support teachers to research their classrooms or their online classrooms? A practical handbook. And this is a link is at the top of that handout I gave you as well. But just as a taster, as a overview really of some of the difficulties or some of the skills that we need to mentor practitioner research, I'm just going to show you some of the chapters from the book. So one thing we need to think about is how to get started, deciding who to mentor. You can see from the headings what's important: building trust and rapport, building confidence, planning an initial orientation session. So you'll find advice there. It's also quite important right at the beginning, to plan a timeline, and also to plan how you're going to communicate with busy teachers. Some teachers don't like email; they use WhatsApp or they use other things. You have to talk with them how they prefer to be communicated with, and how are you going to keep a good record of what's going on? Because the teachers in the project in India and Nepal, I was working with mentors, and each mentor had about 8 or 10, sometimes, teachers that they were working with. And keeping track was quite important. Of course, you don't have to work with so many teachers. You could just start by working with 1 or 2 teachers, perhaps. But still, you need to think about how are you going to keep in touch? What's your timeline going to be? What are your deadlines going to be? Part 2 of the book is all about the different stages in a practitioner research project, in an exploratory action research project, because the exploratory part is developing research questions to try to understand the situation before you take action later on. But first of all, teachers have lots of different issues, lots of different possible topics. And that chapter will help you to help them to narrow down to one topic, because you can't research everything all at once. And how to then guide teachers to develop research questions. I think this is one of the most difficult things, but one of the most important things and rewarding things about mentoring teachers to do practitioner research. Basically, you have to try to help them through dialogue to identify what do you already know about the situation, but more importantly, what do you not know? What are your questions? What are your areas of uncertainty? What are you not really sure about? And those things can then become good research questions. And then, of course, helping them to think, how can I collect data to answer my questions? And this is where I think we have to be very down to earth and realistic about what teachers can do in their situation, the lack of time they have. and showing them that they don't have to do very, very complicated things which interfere with teaching, trying to build it into teaching as much as possible. And then how to analyze, how to help them to analyze data. And here you can see we are using some technical words, quantitative and qualitative, but we are trying to show how you can help them in a rather down-to-earth way learn how to, for example, find themes from the different responses they get if you ask them to do some reflective writing, ask the students to do some reflective writing. All of these are, relatively kind of challenging for the mentor, but I hope that this book is helping you to see how you can do it. Then we move into possible action research. So helping the teacher to identify what was the most important thing they learned from this process, so that they then plan some action that's very, very appropriate to the situation. And then finally, helping them to share their research, and it could be through posters. It doesn't have to be through writing, but there is some advice about writing as well. So I'm going to give you a kind of taster from this, and this is about guiding teachers to develop research questions from the book, just to show that you would have a dialogue. I'm sure that some of you are already doing this kind of dialogue. Maybe if you are supervising graduation, dissertation in your context or something like that, you talk with your student teachers, don't you, about what issues they want to research, and then you try to help them to find research questions. Well, with a teacher, you say, what's the issue that you've decided to address? The teacher says, well, my students are not motivated, very common issue. And then the mentor might say, you say the students are not motivated. Well, which students are not motivated? And there is advice in the book about the kinds of question you can ask. You can probe, you can challenge them, you can ask them to clarify things. A question like, which students are not motivated? All of them or just some of them? Which ones? See, mentor is challenging. Oh, I'm not sure. Now, whenever a teacher says, I'm not quite really sure, because teachers often have assumptions, don't we, about what's going on. And sometimes we need to have our assumptions challenged. Okay, so perhaps one of your research questions could be, which students say they are demotivated and why? Okay, so we're not moving to collect data, we're just establishing what the research questions are. And there are some exercises in the book. For example, I'm concerned that students are always using L1. When you say always, when exactly means when during the class. When do they use L1? When do they use L2? I'm not sure. Okay, so then you could imagine that the research question could be, at what points in the class do students use L1? At what points in the class do students use L2? And that can then help this teacher to understand and then to find some appropriate action. We also have some tasks like this. So to help you as a mentor, try to identify what kinds of questions are good, so-called good research questions, and which ones are not. So this teacher says, my students don't seem to enjoy pair work. They don't seem to enjoy pair work. And maybe what kinds of games do students enjoy is not a very good question, because that's not really related. Okay. But number two is a good question. What are students' opinions about pair work? You say seem to enjoy it. Sounds like you're not really sure. So maybe that would be a good kind of question. And there are answers in the book for you to look at. Of course, the next chapter would be about, once you've established your research questions, helping teachers to find what kind of data to get. Data is another technical word that we do use because it's quite a useful word. Information to answer a question. And it's important to match methods to research questions. I'm sure you know this already. So we try to help a little bit by saying that, well, some good questions are about exploring what you think about a particular situation. And then those kinds of data could be useful. And number two, that is where maybe what you might call literature review can come in. That you're trying to understand what you mean by, for example, motivation, or participation, and you might read what's available and try to answer. But often questions are about others' perceptions, like what do students feel, what do parents feel. And we put number 7 questionnaire last because from their university days, teachers tend often to think they always have to do a questionnaire, but they don't always have to do a questionnaire. Sometimes it's much simpler, less time-consuming to do number 4, for example. And then questions are often about behavior or performance, and some of those methods might be useful. I'm going to come to, so I would encourage you to look at that handbook, mentoring handbook, for more advice, more practical advice about the different stages. I'm going to come, so Shirin asked me, or there was a question about should a teacher educator always have done practitioner research in order to introduce other teachers or student teachers. I said, well, it's valuable, definitely very valuable to understand practitioner research from the inside, definitely, but it's not compulsory. I think you can often imagine doing a good job without having done it yourself. Okay, now, but I think there is value in researching your own practice. And now we're talking about the other side, which is your own practitioner research. And there is a chapter in the book, the handbook for mentoring teacher research, reflecting on and researching your practice as a mentor. So just to give you a taster, there was a recommendation that to develop yourself as a mentor, but we could also say develop yourself as a teacher educator generally. I mean, we give feedback, for example, to develop your ability to give feedback, or to train, in general. It's valuable to keep a journal, just like we recommend to students. We keep a teacher diary or teacher diary. You could keep a teacher educator journal, and this can be a good starting point for your own practitioner research. And here are some questions that you could ask yourself every week or every time you do something. And then from that journal, you can identify issues that you might like to address, you might like to understand better. And with an exploratory action research approach, you would first of all try to understand the issues. And here are some questions to ask yourself, that you might ask yourself now even, about your own practice at the moment. And, the fourth one there is starting to think, well, what data can I find? And the last one is actually starting to make a plan. So I just say, if you're interested, and I'd encourage you to think about doing practitioner research as a teacher educator, go back to this book and do it for yourself. Okay, go through the process of exploratory action research. Now, in terms of supporting teacher educators, of course, we have this community, the teacher educator community, specifically about supporting teacher educators or others who want to help other teachers to do practitioner research, because sometimes there are teachers who've done practitioner research who would like to support other teachers in their context, in their school, and we don't really call them teacher educators. Maybe we should, I don't know, but that sometimes happens, that you've got a teacher who's gone through the process, they've found some benefit in doing exploratory action research, they want to share it with other teachers, so they're part of this we're developing a community of practice, which we're calling MentorNet. But it's been going for a number of years, very informal network of people around the world who have been mentoring teacher research as teacher educators or as fellow teachers, teacher to teacher. You're very welcome to join. You're very welcome to join for free. It's you just follow. There is a link on that front page, which will show you how to join. We have monthly meetings. We call them support group meetings, where mentors who are supporting teacher research, whether pre-service, for example, we've got Ravi Chakraborty in India, in Bangalore, and he has a program where every month he brings a big group of about 90 teachers from all over South India, and he introduces them to exploratory action research, and then he encourages them to go and carry out the action research part of it. So he's one of our members, for example, if you're thinking of that kind of thing. And we learn from each other, because we're developing our ideas as we go along about how best to mentor teacher research. And we've had some webinars where just the mentors are talking, and you can watch on that website, you can see the video, you can hear them talking about their experiences of mentoring teacher research. Most recently, we had this one last year, and we're trying to make a book from the stories, and we will publish that this year, IOTEFL Research SIG. So, acknowledging IOTEFL Research SIG support, as well as British Council support. And so the festival that we're organising, I showed you earlier, is supported by the IOTEFL Research SIG, organised by MentorNet, and also supported by the British Council, for which we're very, very grateful. And there are some things coming up. There's going to be one public event every month where we will have sharing of mentors' experience. And it will enable us to understand better what is going on around the world in terms of supporting practitioner research. Today, I could just give you my view or what I know at the present time, but I think we're going to be developing our knowledge of it better as we go along. Please come along to this next one. Register either through the website I showed you or by this QR code. And we will be hearing from a number of mentors of teacher research from around the world who have successfully completed some projects, and they supported their teachers to present at a conference online. I think it was last month. Yes, last month. And you can see the links actually at the bottom of your handout. Not to this last conference. We will be making that available later, but to previous online conferences, which we think is a good target for teachers, for mentors and teachers to present at. So challenges. I'm just coming back now to the beginning and just remind you of the challenges that we have to recognize in relation to practitioner research. But in the balance, and I'm going to highlight here, there are, of course, challenges for you. It may involve you in extra time, may involve you in new skills. But I would just want to show that, or encourage you to think that there is a balance. There are two sides. And recognizing the reality of those challenges on the left, but there are potential benefits. And in my own experience, these have outweighed the challenges. And in many teachers' experience, they have outweighed. And I think the things on the right can be benefits for teachers, but they can also be benefits for you and for teacher education in general. And let me just focus on that, finally, because my title was, How Can Teacher Education and Practitioner Research Support One Another? My main topic today has been, how can teacher educators support practitioner research? But practitioner research can also support teacher education and teacher educators. If you engage in either supporting teachers or in your own practitioner research, I think these benefits can happen for you as a teacher educator. Plus, I think there is potential for publications, and that's something that can motivate us with teachers. I know, reporting on their practitioner research that you have supported, or in relation, and you can edit their stories into a book, or you can write articles together with the teachers with your expertise. And in relation to your own practitioner research, I think there is a lot of potential here for more teacher educator research. Okay, we talk about teacher research. Let's say teacher educator research, which I would define as practitioner research by teacher educators about your practice, where you're researching your own practice. And I think more than that even, there's a lot of potential for empowered, that's you as a teacher educator, empowering, because you are empowering or you're helping teachers to become empowered, leadership of the field. So why are teacher educators not leaders? They often are, but they need to be more leaders, more than the academic researchers who are not really engaged with the issues facing teachers around the world. Let's call it teacher educator autonomy. Speaking with and for teachers and setting appropriate agendas which reflect teachers' concerns. So you are there in touch, close to practice with teachers in the ways I've been suggesting as leaders in the field. Okay, so current realities, just to go back to these current realities that the questioner from Iraq mentioned as well, and that we all recognize. But let's have a vision of something positive where, which I think practitioner research or a commitment to practitioner research can support. Thank you very much. Time for some more questions, if there is time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. We have really good questions, so I will try to share them with you. So Jim says, as an active teacher in the field, how can I do research by myself without the help of a teacher educator?
Okay, that's really a good question. I have been emphasizing, haven't I, I wasn't really explicit enough, perhaps, that it is very valuable to have a mentor, to have somebody guiding you as a teacher. And especially in these projects, it's not something that comes naturally to teachers. You know, it's you can't just let them go and say, right, this is a good idea. Go and do some. Don't go and do some research into your practice. The role of a mentor, just like the role of a teacher in relation to learner autonomy, let's say, you know, learner autonomy doesn't mean just let them be free and they go and study for themselves. Scaffolding is always important and useful for developing students, learners' ability to learn. I think we recognize this, the role of a teacher, as a guide, as a counselor, as a facilitator. And it's exactly the same with practitioner research. Practitioner research means it's a new thing. It's developing a kind of autonomy as teachers, which we may not have had. And having a guide is really, really useful. Having said that, you know, I would suggest looking at the book Handbook for Exploratory Action Research as a first step. Also, if you don't want to look at that, first of all, read some of the stories of teachers who've done these projects. Now, the mentor is usually not mentioned, but they usually do have a mentor in the background who's really been holding their hand, well, not holding their hand, but helping them a lot along the way. So it kind of looks like, wow, they've managed to do this all on their own. They haven't. They've had a mentor in these books. Nevertheless, you know, you've got the books now. You've got the models. You can see what they've done. Just learn from those. And I hope you find them enjoyable stories and not a hard work to read these stories, because we've tried to make them full of pictures and full of you know, real experiences of teachers. So have a read. Imagine yourself doing the same thing and look at the handbook. And I hope that you will manage to do that.
Richard, just to check with you, you also had an Evo session, right? So
Oh yeah.
do teachers or teacher educators have a chance to
Yeah.
experience mentoring or being mentored?
Yeah, there's the ITA for Research SIG and MentorNet. We support every year from January to February an initiative which is done within TESOL International Association, which is called an Electronic Village Online. I think if you search for Electronic Village Online in Google and then look for, but it's in January and February every year. So we've just finished the January to February. We had two. One was for mentors, for teacher educators who want to learn how to mentor, but the other one is for any teacher around the world, and you'll get some mentoring. You'll get a 5-week sort of program for free. It's all voluntary, and that would be a good thing for you to do. Watch out for Electronic Village Online, and they will advertise it around November this year, because it happens every year. and look out for the one that says teacher research for professional development. But there's nothing happening really until then, I think.
Okay, but this is, I think, a great opportunity
Yeah,
for those in a safe environments with
yeah,
knowledgeable, experienced mentors.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard. Another question. Is the research only for teachers or teacher educators, or can school principals conduct research?
Of course, yes, and we do have some in India. There were some cases where some of the mentors were mentoring school principals yes, you can do so. Maybe we should call it practitioner research. Sometimes I start to talk about teacher research, but maybe we should stick with the title. It says practitioner research. Any practitioner of any kind of professional work or practical work can research your own practice. And in the case of a principal, yeah, I'm sure there are many different areas of your work. Maybe you are teaching sometimes, but maybe you are coordinating the curriculum or something, or also liaising with parents. Any of those issues, the most important issue for you, choose that, and this definitely you can research it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Okay, that's great. Yes, definitely.
Hmm.
I agree with you.
And the
Uh,
reason to research it is to understand your issue. I mean, it's often a problem. It's not always a problem. It's sometimes a puzzle. Sometimes something you're just not sure about. Or sometimes, occasionally, it's a success. You want to build on some success as a starting point. And it can really help you to understand the issue better and then to improve the situation, I think.
and then they can start a school culture, research culture in the school. So
If
that.
it's successful, I mean, some school principals find that they really are too busy, unfortunately, to continue. So yeah, keep your expectations matched to your context and your what you are able to achieve in your context, and then hopefully, as you say, Sharon, it could start to create a culture of practitioner research.
Mhm. And imagine, okay, this is another question from Melanie. So, what qualities one to be a teacher research mentor? So, I have carried out teacher research before, but I'm wondering if I'm qualified to mentor other teachers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I don't know about all of you, but when I first became a teacher educator, uh, it wasn't a sudden switch. The very first few times, I really didn't know what I was doing. Um, and eventually I realized, oh, it's like teaching, but it's different and it's got its own characteristics, but it's a continuum. So just try it and you'll learn from the experience. I think that's the most important thing is that we reflect on and we learn from and maybe research, but most importantly, we reflect on the experience. We talk about the experience with others and we learn in that way. But that's my belief about how we learn as teachers, as teacher educators, or as students. It's no different for me. You know, we're all learners, and we learn. This is my view, anyway. We learn by through experience and through reflection on experience, and I even better research on experience. In other words, collecting data, gathering data to get new perspectives, and that's how we learn. Do it, just do it, and that's what we all do. We just start in some way, and we learn together, I think.
That's great. Yes, that makes it really more enjoyable. The learning is the focus, and because also it's a bit technical, this research process. We need to make it perhaps a bit more achievable, right?
Yeah, I think we all have our images of research with a big R, which come from our background, our education, and the way that we are made to feel actually about research. Sometimes we are made to feel that we can't do it by people who are setting themselves up as superior to us. We are the researchers, and you're just a teacher or something like that. So there are psychological barriers to overcome sometimes, and just to realize that research can be something practical, something useful, something down to earth, achievable, feasible, is change in mindset.
Okay, so actually, maybe you are saying teachers or teacher educators are already conducting research,
Yeah,
but
yeah, often.
unconscious to do this in a more maybe
Yeah,
conscious. manner, systematic manner.
Yeah, just to explicit way. Yeah, I mean, and to realize that uh, we do research. If you have ever, I don't know, well, if you have ever gathered data from your students, evaluations, we have to do that often. And then if you just ignore them, well, that's not research. But if
Mm.
you're interested in what they are saying about your lessons, you're doing research.
Okay. Like collecting feedback,
Mm.
keeping a journal. These are all actually daily practices.
Yeah.
Another question, and we may finish with this one. So, how could we, Josh is asking, how could we put together large collections of diverse teachers learning from contextualized research, maybe described as structured stories, and make it easy to find the stories relevant to your context, to your
Yeah,
own?
that's a great question. Why is that a great question? Because it's something we are thinking about very seriously just now. Because you see, we've got all these now. The situation has changed a lot, I think, over the last 10 years. We can now say we have got a good bank of published stories of teacher research, and what we should do now, I think, is continue to put them out there, continue to and teacher educators can help. You can put them up there locally on a website. Okay, but what we do ideally need to do now is put them all together and find ways of searching these and helping teachers to navigate to find teacher research reports which they can view as relevant to them. And I think often they will find them uh, interesting and useful and accessible. Okay, these are open access, but we need to find better ways of indexing and sharing and making a database. And we're trying to work on that with the British Council, with ITIFL Research SIG, and we are working on it.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. So yeah, we have so many other questions, but we have limited time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. So
Thank
we hope, yeah, our participants have downloaded. I mean, this document has been really helpful. You have access, everyone, to all research links, the handbooks, and all the other useful documents from Richard. Richard, there's one more question. Can I share it with you as well, if you have time?
you.
Um, so Susanna says some academics believe they should teach pre-service teachers only advanced, sophisticated research methods. As you mentioned, that action research is not real and valuable research because it's not considered on representative samples. How can we convince them on the value of exploratory action research? Because you're also an academic. It's sometimes needed, for example, when we create new study program or develop new courses.
What is needed? Sorry.
How to convince them on
Oh,
the value of exploratory
oh
action?
yes, yes, I see. Yeah, I do agree with you. Unfortunately, I think unfortunately this is the case that we have research methods courses for teachers, which are somehow based on the assumption that these teachers are going to become academics. But only one or two maybe will go forward and become get PhDs and then become a university academic. Most of these students are going, if they are going to become teachers, then the assumption might be that, well, they need to learn how to read, they need to understand these complex statistics and research methods, etc., or analysis tools in order to read research. But I think yes, when they become a teacher, and then therefore they will learn to become a better teacher by reading this kind of research. As I said at the beginning, my assumption is that that's the wrong assumption. That is not how teachers learn. That is not what teachers are going to be doing. It's a false assumption. Okay, uh, we know that. We know that teachers are not reading these reports. We know that these reports anywhere are inaccessible behind paywalls. They can't get them. Some people are trying to make summaries of these reports, but I don't know if research has been done to see if teachers are actually reading those. Graham showed really, I think
Mhm.
that is not happening. So it's just a wrong way, um, and but it's a powerful. These are the people with power. How to challenge power is a difficult question, and it's a local question, contextual question. which I can't answer for you. I'm so sorry, but I just think I'm in my own way. In my own way, I keep on going in what I do, and supporting teachers in this way. And I guess I'm lucky to be able to get some credit for it through impact here in my university, just locally. In my case, it's not enough because I still need to publish. But I don't like to publish much academically about teacher research. I like to support it in a practical way. So my actual research publications are more about history and stuff like that. But I do spend a lot of time doing this as well. And luckily, I have to give credit to my university. I've given credit to Research SIG, to the British Council, but also universities in Britain are valuing impact work a little bit more than they used to. So I've found that has been beneficial for me in my local context to do that kind of work. But every context is different. I sympathize with your challenge. But I think in the end, I hope in the end, people identify good things. Some people see good work and get value. You get value. I hope you get a lot of value from doing this kind of work. And in the end, I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Well, we can continue, but time has is the limit, so we need to come to an end. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Richard, for your input and insights on the topic. We hope our participants have found the session useful and picked up useful ideas, and actually the inspiration to start your first exploratory action research. And you have all the links to get started. And so we hope to see you in our future sessions as well. And we hope to see you again, Richard, in the future in our future webinars.